Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hey everybody, this is the Digital Asset Investor, and today in the private group, I'm going to give you my case for how I think Bitcoin gets passed, probably by XRP, but by potentially others, maybe multiple others, at a minimum by 2030. I believe that's going to happen. I think grown men will weep, and I think that you will get to witness it. Now, if you want to go join the group, you can go to daixrp.com to join through the Patreon, or you can click the join button below any of my YouTube videos if you'd rather join through YouTube, less than the price of a cup of coffee. Check this out. French police rescued the father of a crypto millionaire who was kidnapped for 5 to 7 million ransom. One finger was cut off before a raid saved him, and 5 suspects were arrested. Folks, these were the guys at Ledger, and one of the many reasons that I don't keep my stuff, that I don't use self-custody anymore. But luckily, my partner, Caleb and Brown, has institutional grade custody, and I've always believed this is where it all ends, at least for people with a lot of money. They're not gonna take their chances on whether they lose their keys or can't figure out how to do the Ledger Nano. Nothing against Ledger, by the way. It served its purpose for years, but I believe self-custody through institutional grade custody that's insured is the way to go, and that's what I do with Caleb and Brown. You can too. Go to xrpwealth589.com, and that will forward you to my page here on Caleb and Brown. You click the sign up today button. This way you can start sleeping a lot better than you ever have, because trust me, it's a better night's sleep when you know it's taken care of. Bree Teresi, I don't know if I'm butchering your name. If I am, sorry. She's the model, golf influencer, crypto enthusiast who is into XRP and says, don't forget to buy your tickets for XRP Vegas. Go to xrplasvegas.com to get those. We're 24 days out. It'll be here soon. The market has been pulling back a little bit. We're now at 2.92 trillion in the market. Kind of boring. Look at this. Teachers power the future, and we're proud to support them. From Ripple starting with Teacher Appreciation Week, Ripple's committing $25 million to U.S. classrooms through Donors Choose and Teach for America, supporting critical resources, financial literacy initiatives with funding made possible through RLUSD. Here's Warren Buffett. They had the Berkshire Hathaway annual shareholder meeting where he's announced that he's going to be stepping down as, chairman? But anyway, here's an interesting thing he said about the natural course of government and currency.
And obviously we wouldn't want to be owning anything that we thought was in a currency that was really going to hell. And that's the big thing we worry about with the United States currency. I mean, the tendency of a government to want to debase its currency over time there's no system that beats that. You can pick dictators, you can pick representatives, you can do anything, but the people, there will be a push toward weaker currencies, and of course that is, I mentioned very briefly in the annual report that the fiscal policy is what scares me in the United States, because it's made the way it is, and all the motivations are doing a lot of things that can cause trouble with money. But that's not limited to the United States. It's all over the world, and some places it gets out of control regularly. As they devalue at rates that are breathtaking, and that's continued. I mean, and people can can study economics and you can have all kinds of arrangements, but in the end, if you've got people that control the currency, you can issue paper money, and you will, or you can engage in clipping currencies like they used to do centuries ago. Or there will always be people. It's the nature of their job. I'm not singling them out as particularly evil or anything like that. But the natural course of government is to make the currency worth less.
I think that sums it up. Look at this from Smoke. I remember this. I think this was going around a long time ago, but it's worth reminding everyone. Central Bank of France has explicitly stated a preference for using XRP as a basis for issuing a digital euro. Preferential features. France has openly discussed Ripple XRP as a possible platform to Europe's central digital currency and reiterates the preferential features. Let's see what else they said here. Australia's released a report that says Central Bank of France is considering using Ripple and XRP as a potential platform for issuing the digital euro. Now, it would be bad if these two clowns were just ignorant of XRP, but they're not. None of these Bitcoin maxis are. They've always known it's the greatest threat to Bitcoin, rightly so. Grown men will weep, and let me show you two of them. They just don't. They just are having a hard time getting their mind around the idea that it's not Bitcoin, it's XRP.
Can only last so long if there's real social value. It should translate into eventually financial value. And that's sort of some of these L1 tokens might be stuck in a between, in a weird in between, because they produce a lot of social value, but financially it's hard to justify some of these valuations, I would say.
Well, exactly. And I don't think, when I said you have to have at least one of those three, I would say if you just have financial value or you just have utility value, you probably still have some value. If you only have social value, as you said, that's not enough unless it ultimately leads to financial value. But Ripple's a good example, right? XRP is obviously an insanely overvalued asset at 100 and some billion.
It's an obviously undervalued asset.
Market cap or whatever it is now, right? 131 billion as of right now. But that doesn't, because there is no financial value, there is no utility value, it's 100% just social value. But you can't dismiss what you just said, which is that social value of being one of the oldest cryptocurrencies and having this massive following could one day lead to something that does have financial value. And, I always say, and when people say is Ripple worthless? I say, it's not worthless. I can't define what it's worth, but it's
one of the tells is how they call XRP Ripple. And that's how you know, because they know the difference. So that's an intentional, it's a word that they use. It's intentionally to confuse the situation and make it look like it's the same thing. And that's how you know that they have bad intentions.
It's not worthless because it's basically just a really, really, really expensive call option on what it could be in the future based on the fact that it has cornered that social value, right? And I think that's where, even GameStop is a good example of that, right? GameStop has been purely social value, the stock for 3
I would call Bitcoin the example for GameStop.
or 4 years, but ultimately because they have created such high social value, now they can, in theory, do other things. Right now, they're issuing debt. Now they're issuing debt because of that social value to go buy Bitcoin, which might create some real financial value and things like that. So, ultimately, I don't invest in things that only have social value because I can't figure out what that's worth. But you can't dismiss it and say that it doesn't have value.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. We're just in one of the last segments. I was just thinking a lot about the social value. You just mentioned Ripple has value because it's been around for a while, and it is synonymous with how institutions are coming and DeFi becoming the rails of finance. I would argue Ripple is just, Brad and team have just done a phenomenal job of making Ripple synonymous with the crypto, the promise that crypto is going to transform finance. It's not your local DeFi maker project that has catch the bid. It's Ripple.
Yeah, in simpler terms, it's just fake it till you make it. That's effectively what it is, right? You fake it until you make it, and eventually, if you fake it long enough and people believe you, then you have a war chest of cash and resources to actually build something real.
Are you starting to figure it out, buddy? Now that you've heard the children, or I don't even call them children in this case, now that you've heard the people that are trying to lead you astray, now let's listen to Stanford professor Susan Athey, I forgot her name yesterday, give you the adult talk.
So in your opinion, which cryptocurrency has actually tried to solve the flaws of Bitcoin, or which is the most advanced? That's part one. Part two is that is there a better model available than burning energy that can cure of the fundamental flaw in all these mechanisms?
So this is a very deep question, and you could read, thousands of pages on Reddit of people arguing about this. So I will say a few kind of comments, but I cannot claim to have all the answers. So when I first started talking about alternative cryptocurrencies in, say, 2013, and I was involved with Ripple very early, there was a whole set of people, including some of our famous tech leaders in Silicon Valley, who would stand up and say, scale economies, the best thing doesn't always win. Bitcoin was first. Bitcoin, everything is going to be Bitcoin. These other things are all going to die. I would stand up and quietly raise my hand and say, well, if you're thinking about enterprise software, it's not all just like the Betamax and VHS and, Netscape versus IE. In fact, in enterprise software, you typically have a lot of different vertical solutions serving different parts of the market with different combinations of features. And so my thought was that we will see different systems for different purposes. And in fact, that is sort of how that's evolved. So I don't think there's one size fits all. So Ripple wants to move, hundreds of billions of dollars or trillions of dollars between banks internationally. So they need a highly scalable system that is, and these proof of work stuff is just a complete non-starter. So they have sort of, in some sense, controlling who keeps track of the ledgers. And they also have software that allows you to just move things without even touching the cryptocurrency. So you wouldn't even really call it a cryptocurrency solution. For that use case, that is what's taking off, and the other things are not taking off so much. For developers, you might want a cryptocurrency that actually has the ability, more ability to write software embedded in the protocol. And so Ethereum has gone a lot in that direction in terms of making it easy for people to build software on top of Ethereum. So Ethereum is almost thinking of itself like an operating system, really. And so that's good for that. There are coins that preserve financial privacy. So there are coins that actually do everything that Bitcoin does, and there's still a big ledger, but nobody from the outside can look at it and reconstruct the network of who sent what to whom. If you're trying to evade capital controls or do money laundering, that's your currency. That looks great. And of course, consumers might have an interest in financial privacy, even if they're doing legitimate things, because if you can see on the network that you hold a lot of cryptocurrency, you're actually vulnerable to kidnapping and all sorts of other things. And you're more vulnerable with crypto because the money can move across borders so fast. So you're at risk of theft in a way that you're not for the money that's stored in a bank. So I would just say that they're different. And I don't think it's going to be one size fits all. I don't think there's going to be 1,000, but there may be 15 or 10 that actually each solve a different use case better. And the biggest problem right now is we actually have very little product market fit. There's hardly any actual use cases where this thing is really doing a great job. So trying to make it one size fits all just makes that problem harder rather than easier.
Okay, we'll go on. Wanted to show you this. I said crypto's was never going to be anonymous. It was never going to be outside the control of governments. That's Bitcoin maxi fantasy land. The EU will ban anonymous crypto accounts by July 2027. They want to monitor every transaction above 1,000 euros. Now here's Crypto Insight UK. He is talking about a $22 XRP being very feasible. Check this out.
Around March of 2017, Bitcoin had its first major breakdown in terms of dominance, and we broke down from this is showing 97% down to 63%. And that's when XRP really started to take this rip. Look, if we say, look, XRP rips it up here as Bitcoin dominance. Really, look, if you can see the lines on the top and the bottom of my screen, you can see XRP's on the top and Bitcoin dominance on the bottom. It really started to rip up as Bitcoin dominance took this fall. And then other altcoins rallied in this area. And Bitcoin dominance then continued to fall. But then what actually we saw is that Bitcoin dominance stopped out here and XRP price stopped out here. and then XRP spiked up in price, and Bitcoin dominance had that last flush out, okay? That's what I'm looking at right there. So even this flush out of the 40% one that we talked about, that equated to about a 1,100% gain for XRP, 11x. And now people are going to say, yeah, market caps have changed and XRP's, it would mean it goes to whatever billion, trillion dollar market cap. I'm just showing you guys already that those trillions of dollars could very easily already be in the market for us to be able to flow over into XRP to do this 11x gain from where we are now, 218, 11x. 218 is not 11x, sorry, 1,100%, or is that 11x? Yeah, it is 11x, sorry. Brings us to like, $22. And that's very feasible. It's possible based on market caps. And as long as you think that XRP takes as much dominance as it has previously.
All right. I like it. Checking this out from Chad Steingraver. Congress timeline schedule. We have limited time to pass stablecoin bills through. Ideally, we pass through by the end of May, but we have until July 24th. Here's the calendar where Congress will be in session, I guess. I think we can skip this, but here's what we're going to talk about in the group. In DAIXRP.com, which is the Patreon, or you click the join button right below this to join through YouTube. I'm going to tell you, I don't just think it's possible that Bitcoin is going to be passed and become an altcoin. I think it's impossible for it not to be passed, at least by, say, 2030. Well, I'm going to make the case, and I'm going to show you how it's going to do it. And the reason, it's just purely a numbers game. There's almost no way it cannot be jumped by XRP and others. I think XRP will be the first one to take it out. But it will be others. And I'll show you some of those others too that have the potential. I'm the digital asset investor. I'm not an investment advisor. This is for entertainment purposes only. Please subscribe, hit the like button, tell your friends and family that I have someone that just said that let's see.